Making a surprise one-handed thrust.
Feint high and then extend.
I'm just thinking, that's a stupid thing that he's doing, while I'm then getting hit by it.
How do you feel about actually throwing the sword? So imagine for a moment, in a historical scenario, you had to fight a duel. And you know, unfortunately, the opponent is better than you. They are more skilled and more experienced, but you'd rather not die. So what could you do to try to maximize your odds? In 4 weeks, or who knows what, you have to fight this person. If you were to coach someone in that situation, what would you tell them?
Part of it is, you might think about what your physical qualities are that could be your advantage. Do you have some speed or some mass, some place where you might be able to play to some physical or prior experience training that could work in your favor? Maybe you've done a lot of judo or something like that, so you feel like, oh, you know, I can get close to that guy, then maybe I do have some more experience in this realm. And also where your comfort zone is. If we only have a few weeks to train, you won't be able to have a psychological revolution in that time to become a different person. How comfortable are you with wrestling? And if you're like, great, I love getting into wrestling, we might think, okay, you should try to get inside on that guy. Even if he's a decent wrestler, he's a big, long lever. And so we might focus our training just on how to make reasonable covers and how to move in with confidence under a reasonable cover so that you can get into that wrestling place. We probably won't have time to train you to become a great technical wrestler. We're just going to get you into a basic spot. You know, here's how you can wrap somebody up and with enough exuberance, hopefully put yourself into a position of advantage. And we'll focus much more on the most dangerous part, which is just getting to that place. So even maybe, yes, I'm a wrestler, but I don't feel confident I can cover distance very quickly. That's kind of an interesting kind of thing. So I'm not going to get in there. I'm just not quick on my feet. He's a tall guy. He's going to be a long way away from me. So we might instead of building kind of an attacking covering strategy, we might build something that's more about you luring. You know, we're going to do things. You're going to move in and out using low positions, and your goal is to get them to, you know, as a tall person, to reach out, and then you're going to get this control, and now you're going to come in. Our goal is to get good at that luring, capturing sort of piece. And so then we would do a lot of practice on luring, capturing. You know, thinking about Bruce Lee's I fear the man not who knows 10,000 kicks, but who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. We're going to figure out what our kick is. Would be something like, you know, a strong downward suppressing cover will cover cuts and thrusts and everything. You can get this suppression. You'll make your priority getting into a strong cover and moving in and recognizing that most people will do this. Really isolated down to a pretty short set of technical possibilities. And so we can focus all of our training on that. And hope that your counterpart is not spending all their time thinking that's what you're going to do.
Yes. The coup de Jarnac that I've talked about before is one of those examples. He kept doing the same thing and it kept landing. You know, right. The cut to the inside of the leg. There's a bit of luck involved, I suppose. If the thing that you happen to spend the most time on, maybe the opponent isn't as good at dealing with it. If they are, then, well, you're in trouble. But you were in trouble to begin with because, again, we're talking about a more skilled opponent.
And the nice thing about the duel situation is what you do only needs to work one time.
Yes.
You know, it's much more different if you were facing me in a tournament. Maybe you would surprise me with that first rush and get into wrestling, and then I'll be like, never happening again.
Yes.
And now if I have more experience than you, I probably have more tools in my toolkit to shut down your entering. So that is a shift of context that would change how we might train for that situation. But if we know all you need to do is get in safely once, and that's going to be your best chance to win this duel and settle that score, put that guy on the ground, you can often strike somebody with the same technique a few times before they begin to update in some significant way. Certainly before they can build a counter strategy. Rarely am I worried that somebody, upon seeing something one time, will then be able to develop a counter strategy to it. But what they might simply do is create a denial strategy. You know, I'm just not going to let you get near my legs anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think generally it's a good idea to limit how often you do the same thing. Like say you do the same thing up to 3 times, and then after that you start to use that as a feint. Because now you've conditioned the opponent to expect this, and it's like, no, I'm actually going to do the other thing now. That may work.
Absolutely, and it's interesting in that sort of escalation ladder, we have to be perceptive of the opponent too. I have to make sure they do honor the real, like they are prepared to, they respect that this attack could hit them. And then when I see, oh, they've got an answer for that now, or sometimes you get a no shit response from them, that can be really powerful because that can ingrain a counter, like a flinch immediately. And so then I can know, okay, I got the oh shit reaction, now it's time for the feint.
Right.
And then the beautiful thing is if they don't react to the feint, then I just go back to the true intention again.
As a kind of rule of thumb, would you generally advise a more offensive or more defensive mindset in this scenario?
I think, again, it would come down to working psychologically with where that person is.
Right, because different people may be comfortable with.
If you're not an aggressive person, or you can't access, we can't easily find your way of accessing that piece, then that might be a losing road for us. Because we're kind of, again, expecting them to go through a psychological paradigm shift. And instead, we need to say, okay, if you're a more defensive, more receptive-oriented person, how do we work with that? How do we lure the opponent to fall into your pocket, into the space where you will have that confidence?
So let's talk about unexpected things. Trying to do something that the more skilled opponent may just not really anticipate. Cheating also comes into that. Now, in a fight to the death, what is cheating? In a judicial duel, there may be such a thing.
Right.
There may be
There
rules
should be some conditions,
very
yeah.
well, but if you're in a self-defense situation, you do whatever it takes, right? So one thing that comes to mind is Geisland, particularly if you feint high and then extend far to the leg with that may catch someone more experienced off guard. Again, this is probably going to work once or twice.
Right.
This kind of thing they will probably figure out pretty quickly, because the downside of that, of course, is you're incredibly exposed. Like, the light is beat on this blade, and high risk, high reward in that way. What do you think about strategies like that?
Yeah, I think, the reason a lot of those ideas show up historically and still can become things that people love doing now is because especially in the one-time fight situation, having something in your toolkit like that can be really effective. Making a surprise one-handed thrust can reach around somebody's guard in a way that you weren't expecting. And you only need to surprise somebody one time for it to be effective in that environment. And so the only thing that's working against you would be if the person has gained some knowledge of your reputation. And so then they might be aware, okay, I'm going to practice against this thing. This guy does one-handed thrusts a lot. This guy does one-handed cuts to the leg a lot. Okay, let's spend some time practicing that, being aware of it. Let's use it. I think often one of the things I like to do is teach people to do the thing that they're worried about dealing with, because then they can get a little more inside of that tactic, understand it a little bit more from the person employing its side, and then we can think about, okay, how am I going to... Now, again, what I want to do is I want to flip it around. I want to lure you into feeling I'm going to be coming in because I know, and then I might even be thinking of, as you start to make your first feint, I'm going to give the answer that you're expecting, but knowing what I'm setting up. So this is the simplest way that I'm turning that around is, okay, I will be the triggering force in this now, as opposed to you being the triggering force. I don't think anything is cheap or cheating, provided that it's serving its purpose in the right context.
Yeah.
Part of where sometimes we will say, don't do that, is more if, in a training environment, if somebody is restricting their own learning by only using one technique, I as a teacher might say, let's take that technique off the table for you, so that you're forced to express a greater breadth of technical skills here. Don't lose that. That's great. We want to have something else in your toolkit so that if you encounter the person who has an answer for it, you're not like, oh, now what do I do? Then you don't have adaptability. You lose the capacity to see where your opponent is at, and you just kind of go, okay, trick one, did that work? Nope, trick two, did that work? Trick three, did that work? Oh, I'm out. As opposed to being able to have some principles you can apply and thus, make up your own tricks in the moment. That's what we really want to be able to do. But I think having, one-handed cut is, beautiful. To me, this is an art that we do with one-handed, two-handed swords. So this is just cutting with one hand. It's a normal thing, and you should be able to do stuff with your right and your left hand.
Yes.
Thrusting with one hand, well, it's just a rapier.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
We already, none of this is new. In fact, even our counters aren't anything new. If you can deal with somebody with a side sword that's got a long side sword cutting at your leg, you can deal with a one-handed cut from a long sword.
Yeah.
If you can deal with somebody with a one-handed sword thrusting at you, you can deal with somebody with a long sword. It's just that you're being surprised by a change of context that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine, taking a low guard and then suddenly...
Yeah, just, and you're,
From here, you wouldn't expect to need a leg void, right? Because, what am I going to do? This is a really weak cut. Yeah. Right? So normally you don't have to worry about
here
that.
With the two-handed thrust, you'd have to make a big pass to get to my leg. But by turning your body, making a one-handed thrust, you could strike to my leg in a way that I'm not expecting. And even though we can see that there's a counter here, if I'm not prepared to do it, I haven't tactically conditioned myself to take it, It's done. We can say a lot of things about the coup de Jarnac are actually dangerous for Jarnac, but it is the fact that the opponent isn't aware of that idea.
Mm-hmm. And there might be some desperation moves, like, for example, if you're, let's say you're framing with a blade, and so I know that I have to get around it, so I might try something like lunge really deep and try to reach as far as possible and almost like throw myself forward and land on the ground and try to get it that way, which if it fails, you're absolutely very dead.
Yeah.
But it is a very unexpected thing. Like you would not really see that coming normally. Now, we shouldn't overstate that, because just because something is unexpected doesn't mean it's good. You can absolutely
100%.
do something completely idiotic, quite frankly, that is self-defeating. Just because the opponent doesn't expect it doesn't mean it'll get you anywhere.
Right.
So I wouldn't necessarily start Dark Souls rolling, except I guess, again, this could be a personal thing. If someone is really athletic and is extremely good at doing that roll very quickly, because normally the problem is that while you're getting up from the roll, the opponent can just turn around and just cut over.
Strike you. They've got all the time to set themselves up against you, yep.
But again, if you're super athletic and you vault all the way over there and then roll, maybe.
Spin moves in sword fighting. People often say, no, spin moves are all BS. I can actually show you several different traditional martial arts, including some that come out of European traditions that have spin moves in them. And the reality is, yes, a spin move is going to be very opening to you if you do it at the wrong time and you're not very athletic at it.
Yeah. You just opened like this. And
of course, this is terrible. But as soon as your timing is good and you're able to move in and make the action inside the weapon of the opponent at the right time, and especially when the opponent is never trained against it, especially if you could imagine in their environment, this is something that happens at a lot of clubs of all sorts of martial arts. A piece of knowledge goes into the club that spin moves are terrible, never do them, because this bad thing will happen. So nobody in that club ever does them. So people don't even know how to perceive them when they're happening. What might be happening is you're fighting there and they'll start to do the spin move on you, if you're like spinning around on me, and I'm just thinking, that's a stupid thing that he's doing, while I'm then getting hit by it.
Oh yeah, you're just like, what the hell are you doing? And then,
crap, you're cutting me across the middle. I think everybody who's done any martial art has had some experience of thinking, what idiotic, oh yeah, right, got it, he's hitting me with that, because you have no tactical conditioning against it. Because we can't, in the fight, we must rely on, if we don't have lots of distance, then we have to rely on our tactical conditioning, which is more of a brainstem level reaction, and that must be trained. And so you will be a victim of the things that you don't train against, because you'll have to go through this front brain, oh, he's doing a spin move right now. And if you're going through a conversational process, you're getting hit by that. There's a benefit, even if, in lots of ways, it's not a fundamental part of what we teach, your one-handed cuts, one-handed thrusts. It's certainly not at a basic level. But as soon as somebody's going to move into, like in our club, those techniques must be here. People must use them at the very least so that we can practice against them. And I also want people to be able to do if spin moves are something that I'm concerned about encountering the world, I want to make sure some of the best spin move people are here in the club, even if I think that that's a terrible movement once we know how to counter it. Because what we don't want to do also is learn to counter the poorest impersonation of it, because then we're still also not prepared. If the one-handed cutters in the club are kind of, sometimes people do this thing, they kind of, do a one-handed cut and you're like, but badly framed, super easy to see coming. People always kind of go, haha, then of course what the person is conditioning themselves against is a false version of it. So there, again, even now we're going to build some false confidence in people. So instead, it's actually much better that we start to develop a capacity to do technique in a really effective manner. And then even again, if we think it is an inferior technique, once you know the counter we're training is against a good representation.
that's a really good point. I like that, because that way you take everything seriously, because it could be, depending on what happens. Sometimes, again, someone is faster than you and then pulls off the spin or who knows what. If you've never actually seen it in person, like you might know that, oh, this is stupid if you see it from the outside, but while you're fighting, if it happens, you might have this moment of, that can't be happening. You're best off just trying to practice against the best version of whatever this is we're talking about. Even if it seems suboptimal, what does it look like if someone who's really good at doing this strange thing, if they do that, what happens?
Yes. Training progression and what I'm going to do in this fight I have in 4 weeks are just totally different conversations. Okay, I've got a fight in 4 weeks, and you know what? I'm pretty good at one-handed thrusts. Well, let's maximize that skill, because that's what this is for. This is not, the question wasn't, how do I become the best martial artist in 20 years? That's a completely different training program. And so I think that's an important thing. You know, I think in a club, sometimes, or in a school, when people are like, oh man, guys in my club always just cut at the hands, and you know, so I hate that, it's cheap. I think there is a real concern there. The teacher's concern is, I don't want to get over-focused on one technical gimmick because I'm going to restrict my capacity to develop. And so I want my students, they've got to develop, because if they only have a trick, they don't have a system, and they'll not be able to beat the person who then has the counter to that thing. And so that feeling of it's cheap is actually, there's a healthy side, which is, you know, we've got to maybe have tournaments where one-handed attacks aren't allowed, or training spaces, because we want to make people play in these other zones. But we also, if we want to be complete martial artists, need to have one space where that is completely allowed, so that we train against the best version of it, as you were saying.
One more thing, how do you feel about the throw that Fiore shows? Actually throwing the sword, right? You can kind of rotate it around the thumb pretty quickly and throw like this, but I feel like that already takes too long. If we're talking this kind of scenario where like the opponent knows what they're doing, like you can see that. Right? This is not really going to take you by surprise. Whereas, say, if I take this guard, and now suddenly I throw it like straight forward like that, which is actually quite powerful. I've tried that, and by turning your body into it, it's basically a thrust where you let go.
Yeah.
Right? So this could be, I could see that as one of those options, except you have to first get the opponent in a different position where, like, for example, a high guard or something else. But because if you're sort of forward, it's way too easy. Like, what am I going to do? I can't.
Fiore even talks about defending against the thrown sword from here. Yeah.
You might not want to do that, but if, against a high guard, I can see that. That may be...
Where I've placed that into the lexicon of Fiore, and how, you know, we get there just by throwing it back there. So I can actually change to that quite fast. And being here, when I throw from here, it's a little bit like throwing a javelin. So I hear how a javelin throw comes off of the backhand, so you can get that full arm. And I actually like from here because I can send it out with some rotation, which helps the weapon not tumble. So when we throw this way, one thing that can happen, a little bit of kick up on the weapon, and it will start to tumble, and you'll end up hitting not as you want. So in the practicing we've done here, done a bunch of throwing swords at targets, because
you've done that. There you go.
Where I put it in is more like perhaps a scenario where we are in a melee situation, and so I have maybe dealt with you here, I turn, and there's that guy coming towards me, so I'm going to send my weapon at him. I've dealt with my immediate threat, and I'm going to surprise him, because he might feel fully confident.
Yeah, he might just be running, not in the guard.
Yeah, he's just getting to me at this moment. And so, whereas, if we're in a dueling situation, throwing I think, has so many
super high risk.
If I can make the switch quite fast and send the weapon at you before you can expect it, maybe, just like the one-handed thrust, it might be beneficial. But yeah, in one of the workshops that I taught here, we did a scenario where you had to finish off 2 opponents and then turn and throw your sword through a target. And so that was kind of a fun way to practice, okay, can I make the switch quickly, and then can I be accurate enough to hit through a target? And actually in the workshop, I'd say 70% of the students, in this knowing kind of what was going to happen, were able to accurately throw the sword. And using this kind of javelin cast position. Got a little farther, and this rotation, definitely getting the sword to spin, actually helped it be more true than just, I think I might rely on just letting it go for a much shorter distance thrust.
Again, super high risk, but it could work. And where I can kind of see it is if that's not the only thing you do. Like if you, let's say you throw, and then while the sword is going, you draw your dagger, you rush in. So while they're dealing with the thrown sword, then you come in and try to stab him with your dagger, maybe.
There's a guy who has a book on gentleman's skills that includes a bit of rapier dagger. This is later than Fiore, a guy named Quintino, and he has this technique. He has just his one technique for rapier and dagger, and he says that you've got your sword drawn. He says, put it between your legs, draw your dagger, throw it, and then pull your sword out and stab them while they're dealing with your dagger. And so it sounds kind of ridiculous. I've kept it in my mind because of how silly it seems. However, I think that he's actually saying, hey, you know, let's distract them with the one thing you throw at them and then stab them with the other thing. And so, you know, there's definitely, Fury's got his dagger and he knows that that's one of the most intimidating weapons you can get. And if you want to buy some time to get in close.
He has like one stick that he throws and he goes in with a dagger?
Yeah, in the 2 cudgel section,
yes,
he does mention that. Fury's got a lot of stuff. I think, to me, in arts like that, this is certainly what we seek to practice here in Duello Armazari is a martial system. And why does Fury have all of these things there? Part of it is to show that these principles can be applied in many different situations. What if I need to throw this weapon? What if somebody else throws their weapon at me? You know, I want to be able to practice against the best form of that technique. What if I only have some clubs? What if I'm sitting at a table? How do we apply this art? Even these tricks are connecting to a larger whole, which makes them more just applications of a particular set of principles rather than what makes something a trick is just that it lives in isolation. But if you recognize, oh, you know, I can use my sword one-handed from the base hand, one-handed from the lead hand, in both hands, I can switch which is my lead hand. You know, now we're talking about application of a martial system that just has a bunch of different ways that you can apply it.
Yeah. Whereas, I guess a trick would be something like Talhofer throwing a hat in the guy's face. that would be a trick. So yes, stuff like that can work then.
But you know, just using the tools available to you.
Yeah.
That's, you know, certainly why a martial art is good to be practicing all the time, so that we have more tools available to us. I've had situations where I had to pull a guy off of a friend's truck who was trying to be on there, and that guy was immediately fighting with me as soon as and so I was happy that I had a lot of wrestling experience and was able to apply those skills. You know, there's certainly some of my students, if I've a student who's a nurse who's had to use some basic, what she saw as sword skills that just happened to come up, they expressed themselves in an unarmed setting because she had a good sense of distance and timing. Against some combative patients who were brought into the ER. I like doing martial arts that have a form of applied setting, whether that's, you know, sparring just in the school or sparring in tournaments, some place where I'm experiencing the techniques and then I can condition myself.
Well, that sums it up nicely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.